Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we talk with hoteliers making a positive impact on the hospitality industry. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Michael Johnson. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Brendan. Lovely to be here.
It's good. Michael, before we delve into the questions and get to know you a little bit more, I'll just run through your bio very quickly just to set the scene. So Michael is the CEO of Tourism Accommodation Australia, New South Wales, and the National Division. In this role, Michael calls upon his experience within the hotel industry, which now spans 4 decades across Australia and New Zealand. Michael's managed 4- and 5-star business hotels, resorts, tourist attractions, and has experience in all facets of the tourism accommodation industry, from operations to senior management. Michael was with SPHC for over 20 years. He also spent 7 years with Pan Pacific Hotels, and most recently, he was the general manager of the Park Royal Parramatta, where he managed that major redevelopment, the extension, and the 2016 relaunch of that property. Since April 2019, Michael's led the team at Tourism Accommodation Australia, New South Wales, and National, liaising closely with member hotels and with the government to combat industry-specific issues. And I must say, during COVID, he was like an absolute stalwart. He kept the industry going. Michael's a natural ambassador for our industry and is committed to encouraging future generations to try their hand at building a successful career within our industry, an experience he has found extremely rewarding himself. So welcome again, Michael.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And if I can just take that bio just one section further, and that is that we did successfully have our amalgamation earlier this year, which happened July 1, where we were actually able to put the Accommodation Association of Australia and Tourism Accommodation Australia together to form the one body. So we are now one voice for the industry, which is Accommodation Australia. And you might see that logo behind my head there. And I was going to say, we are, we're thrilled. And I have to say, I'm very humbled to be the inaugural CEO of Accommodation Australia.
And a good choice, I must say. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about your early career. I suppose, how did you get involved in hospitality? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or is it something that just happened?
No, it actually was something that just happened. I was actually on a holiday in New Zealand as a young 19-year-old. And I was going to say, I was there for a couple of weeks holiday. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was, set to go home, and I met a fellow in the local pub there in Queenstown, and he said, "So why are you going home?" I said, "Well, I've got to go home and go back to work." And he said, "Well, we could get you a job here." I said, "What would I do?" He said, "Oh, you can work in a hotel. It's not hard work. You wash a few pots and a few dishes." Ooh, I think it was a bit harder than what he made it out to be. But I said, "Oh, okay. Well, where would I live?" "Oh, no, we've got accommodation. We can put you up." And I said, "Oh, great." And, "Oh, well, all I got to do is cook my meals." "No, we do that 3 meals a day." So I thought, wow, this was actually something really, and look, I fell in love with Queenstown.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, well, this is an opportunity for me to stay in Queenstown, to ski in the winter, and I'm going to work in a hotel. And to be honest, it was the start of what has been a really amazing career, and something I've been extremely fortunate to have done. But the interesting thing was, so I went from started in the kitchen, working as a kitchen hand, and I used to work at nights and shift work. I've never seen this before, and of course it was a lot of fun. It was hard work, but there was great people. Everyone had a laugh, and we had a great time. A bit of fun, not as much as that goes on these days. I don't think. Maybe it does. I've just got older. But I was going to say, and then I went into concierge department from the kitchen, and that was fantastic. And look, I still recall actually when I was in that area of the hotel, we were all over the hotel. I think it was the best job because you had the keys to the hotel, and you could go anywhere and everywhere. You had all the guest interaction. You had all the behind the scenes interactions with all the staff right across the hotel. And I just loved it, really loved it. And then, if I got asked, we need someone in the restaurant tomorrow morning. Are you on? Yeah, I'm on late. Yeah, I could do a breakfast shift. I've never done it before. That's all right. We'll teach you. So I'd do a breakfast shift in the restaurant, and then they'd say, you're on this morning. Could you do a bar shift tonight? So I never worked in the bar. Oh, we'll teach you. So it was a case of that I was just getting the best experience, and really we worked it out after a few years that I'd done my own traineeship without knowing it. And at the time, I think it's great that, we all have a mentor, and my mentor was Nigel Harper. He was the general manager of that hotel.
Mhm.
Lovely guy. And he said to me, "What are you going to do when you go back to Sydney one day?" I said, "Oh, I'll have to go back to work." And he said, "What do you call this?" I said, "Well, this isn't work. I love this. I just love it. I love coming to the hotel every day." So he said, "Well, why don't we start getting you through a few other departments?" So I can honestly say I was the first male receptionist that that hotel had had. In those days, you could be totally ageist, you could be discriminative. So that they would put up, we're needing a receptionist, you must be female, over 25. Could you imagine doing that today? You couldn't do it.
It's,
So,
it's,
so I was this young male on the front desk trying to learn to type because we had typewriters and, do you know what I mean? Learning what was then a Sweeter machine, which was there was no computers, of course. So, you had to post all the accommodation, post restaurant. So, look, it was a great experience and I enjoyed it. And effectively, I did complete what was the general manager at the time. He put me into accounts for a period of time. He put me into reservations. And then I was transferred actually from Queenstown to Sydney as a duty manager with Southern Pacific Hotel. And away it went from there.
wow, wow. And which property was it in Queenstown? The Gardens Park Royal or the other one?
No, it was actually Queenstown. It was Queenstown Travelodge at the time, so which is today Crown Plaza, Queenstown.
Yep.
And it was the best hotel in town. I think, in actual fact, at that time, it was the best hotel in New Zealand. It had won those awards
Yep.
because I'm going back. I'm going back quite a way. It was only a couple of years old, and it was a magnificent hotel. And we were so proud of it as well. We had the most magnificent views of Lake Wakatipu and the Remarkables, and it was just stunning. So, and Queenstown then was a country town. It had a population of 3,500. It had no international airports. It was the biggest plane that flew into Queenstown was a 48-seater
Wow.
through Mount Cook. So in those days, all your tourists either drove in or they came by a coach.
Yeah.
And so we would inevitably see 6 or 7 coaches arrive on our door every morning, and we would unload all those bags and get them up to their rooms. And that was sort of where my life started in the industry. And I was fortunate enough in Sydney then to be transferred through a number of the SBHC properties throughout Sydney. And then I was really, I think, fortunate to, I had an opportunity. I'd actually got to food and beverage manager. I was food and beverage manager at what was the old Sydney Park Royal
Oh, yeah.
down at the Rocks. And another one of my mentors that came later in my career was David Sargent, and he was with SBHC at that time. I went on to do some great things later in his life as well. And David said, "What if I had any job for you tomorrow? What would you do?" And I said, "David, I'm here as food and beverage manager. I know I started my life in this industry in the kitchen, but I'd really like more kitchen understanding. I'd like to know kitchen management. I'd like to know more about food waste and all of those things that are so critical, because they're the issues I'm dealing with today, and I really don't have a thorough understanding of them." He said, "Leave it with me." Funnily enough, it was probably 6 weeks later, he said, You're actually starting in 2 weeks' time at the Sydney Boulevard. Our flagship hotel has 4 restaurants, and you'll be in the kitchen. And you'll write your own training program with the chef and the food and beverage manager so that you actually get out of it what you want to get out of it. And look, it was the best experience. I never enjoyed my time so much as what, and we had a wonderful chef, John, I'll get his last name, but I'll get his last name in a minute. But again, lovely team. And we had 55 in the kitchen, 55 chefs in the kitchen. So everything that came into the hotel in those days came in as produce, and then it was produced as the food on the table or the chocolates. We made our own chocolates for coffee. We had a pastry section that worked 24/7. A wonderful hotel. So good old days. And so I did that. And then I was, again, fortunate enough to then go and open Park Royal at Parramatta, which was the first 5-star hotel for Western Sydney in Parramatta. And just a great experience. And again, we had the 3 restaurants, the club lounge, and very large function facilities. And so, and the interesting thing, if I can say, so, some of the great experience, I went on to general manager of a number of properties. I managed Pacific Park Royal for a time. I managed properties in New Zealand. I opened the new centre in Christchurch as general manager. So look, just a wonderful time managing the hotels. And funnily enough, as your career goes on, I ended up back in Queenstown, actually as the general manager of what was Queenstown Travelodge. At that time was Park Royal Queenstown,
Yep.
and Gardens Park Royal, and I managed both. So I was actually the cluster general manager of the two hotels. So it was quite strange going back this time with my wife and 4 children to Queenstown. So
From 19 to fully grown with a family. Yeah.
yeah. And interestingly, I have to say, or anecdotally, that some of the locals that were still there remember me from my old days. I used to have to say, shh, come on, no stories, no stories. We've moved on.
That's amazing. Queenstown's such a wonderful place. I actually got to displace the Swedish system at both of those properties in '94. I spent
Oh,
3 months in Queenstown putting a computer system in. And you're quite right, such a small town. I know my girlfriend at the time, now wife, rang one of the properties and they said, no, Brendan's at the other one, this month. And yeah, it was a great time, Queenstown. It was such a wonderful place.
mm. And so very fond memories, and still got some very good friends in Queenstown. So, but we left Well, funnily enough, I actually came out of the hotels in Queenstown, and having lived there for 5 years, and then this time we'd been there, we'd already done 3 years, and the hotels had gone through a sale process.
Right.
So it wasn't going to be the opportunity for me to really stay there. And so I was looking to get back to Sydney, and yet my family was saying, we don't want to leave here. We love it. And so I had the opportunity then, and again, fortunate to run a tourism company. So I ran Totally Tourism as general manager for 3 years, and that was a wonderful experience. And what I think it proved to me was you could take the skills that I had learned through my career, through the hotel career, and actually put those skills into place in the tourism space as well. And if I use the example, we had helicopters, so the helicopter line, Milford Sound scenic flights, Harris Mountain heli skiing, challenge rafting. You know what I mean? So we had this whole gambit of tourism products. And as general manager, I had a very large team of people. And it was interesting as well that you could assimilate some of those people to what you'd done in hotels. And so, we always know that, particularly with the kitchens, it's a great skill and you have wonderful chefs. If you can't do it, they can do it.
Yep.
So they rule the roost within their domain. And I totally agree with it. Guess what? You can't really tell a heli ski guide what to do, I'll tell you.
Or a pilot.
Or a pilot,
Yeah.
because you can't fly his plane nor his helicopter. So
No.
you really need to use what I'd say really some good management skills to ensure that those people are working well for you and are supportive of you, with the understanding that they know that you can't do what they can do.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. Yeah. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. And then we made the decision to move from Queenstown back to Sydney due to family reasons. And I was in at the Amora here in Sydney, and wonderful hotel, wonderful team, thoroughly enjoyed it. And then following the Amora, I was there for about 4.5 years. I had the opportunity to join Pan Pacific Hotels Group, and I was very interested to join because Patrick Imbedeli was at the helm, and I'd worked with Patrick so successfully before, particularly in Christchurch. And so it was a no-brainer. I just wanted to be there. And it was great, really, really good. And so I had good years back with Pan Pacific Hotels, and then the opportunity to come into the association. And I did feel it was time to be able to give back to the industry. The industry had given me a lot.
Yep.
So time to give back. And that's where I am today. And I have to say I'm thoroughly enjoying it and getting lots of good support, but also hopefully giving good support.
Oh, definitely, Michael. That's amazing. I think it just goes to show that our industry is such a people industry, isn't it?
Mm.
So on that note, is there a particular person that inspires you, or a number of people that have inspired you and given you sort of guidance through your career? I think you mentioned Nigel Harper already, and obviously David Sargent. Are there others as well, or expand on their inspiration further?
I think there was some, very much Nigel Harper, and particularly in the early days.
Mm.
And I was fortunate enough to get, and again, I seem to backtrack on my steps every now and then, because after working with Nigel in Queenstown, Nigel ended up as general manager of the Sydney Boulevard,
Right.
and I had had since then done the full circuit. I'd opened Park Royal Parramatta. I'd been to Auckland and was food and beverage manager in Auckland. And it was actually Nigel that was at the Boulevards. And I ended up back at the Boulevard as director of food and beverage. And that was the funniest thing, because there was people in the kitchen going, wasn't this guy the trainee guy that was here not that long ago, like a couple of years ago? How does he get to be director of food and beverage? And he was a trainee, because I was there incognito. No one knew where I'd come from, or they just knew me as only the chef and the food and beverage manager knew that I was actually had come out of management. Otherwise, I would have got crucified, I think. So definitely Nigel Harper. David Sargent, always been an inspiration. And I think also been an inspiration watching his career, just blossom and continue to blossom, and that real innovation that David always brought to the industry, the success of QT, and the success of the food and beverage operations within Ridges. I think, David was very inspirational in that space, and just had that very solid drive, which, so I always enjoyed David. But also Peter Christian. I worked closely with Peter Christian. I opened Parramatta with Peter Christian, but I also, in the mid-90s, was able to, Peter had been in corporate office for a number of years, and I was invited to go into the development team with Peter. And so I worked in development for SBHC for a couple of years with Peter Christian. So I thoroughly enjoyed that as well. So, yeah, very, very good.
That's awesome. And obviously, you mentioned him, Patrick Mbardelli, as well.
Yes, no, Patrick was someone that I got to work with in Christchurch. And I have to say, I really enjoyed working with Patrick, and we opened the Centra, and Patrick was running the Park Royal at the time. And it was just a very good time, great time in career. And then the two of us ended up in corporate office. I ended up doing development. Patrick ended up head of brands. And then Patrick went on once, then Southern Pacific Hotels was bought by BAS, or IHG as they are today.
Yeah.
And Patrick went on to Singapore. And so I got to continue to work with Patrick in the roles of general manager and catch up with him at conferences and what have you. Yeah, so Patrick's always been an inspiration, always.
That's amazing. Michael, is there a story from your early career? It doesn't have to be an embarrassing one, but maybe it could be embarrassing that you're willing to share, or something that taught you a valuable lesson that you'll never forget?
Look, I think in food and beverage, I was always taught on the floor. I was so not professionally trained, but buddy system trained.
Yeah.
And I was fairly handy. I was very handy in a bar, and I could run a bar fairly smoothly. My waiting skills were never that flash, but they were okay. But I'll never forget, I was assistant food and beverage manager at North Sydney Travelodge. And it was a very busy function hotel. And we had functions going all day, every day. We had a number of rooms, and they would be fully booked. And so it was all hands on. And I always remember, so we would be there taking bookings and doing things, and then come on, it's lunchtime, let's go. And so we'd all just hit the floor and help the team with the respective lunches. And I'll never forget a day. It was a corporate lunch, boardroom lunch, probably about 20 people. And we were serving the dessert. And as I put the dessert down in front of the fellow, I said, there you are, your dessert, sir. And you have another one on your back as well. But I'll get that off. If you just sit there still, I will get that off for you. I had my functions manager. She couldn't help herself. She burst out laughing. She thought, don't laugh. I'm embarrassed enough as it is. You know how you can go around, and it just went dum, and you're down the back of the chair on his suit, and we'll obviously pay for the dry cleaning of the suit as well. So.
And what was it? Do you remember? Was it something like a creme brulee or something?
It was actually, it was like a piece of pavlova.
Oh, right.
Cream, and it just went poof. But what it did for me was, it really did highlight the fact that it's so easy for something of that nature to happen in food and beverage in particular. Yep. And so I think it's always kept me, when I see something or something hasn't been right, during my career, where I sort of think, yeah, those things happen. Don't throw stones, not from glass houses. You know what I mean? And I think, our industry, I think, has grown and grown and grown over the years, and we've certainly become more and more professional. I think we took a bit of a knock around during COVID. We lost a lot of good people, and I honestly believe we've got some work to do to rebuild the professionalism and skill sets. There's definitely a skill gap there at the moment. And I think as well, we've seen where we lost a lot of people, particularly through our middle management as well. And I think we've got some work to do to bring them up.
Yes, 100%. I always like to ask, is there a special, is there a skill or talent you have, a hidden talent, I suppose, that not many of your colleagues would know? Like, are you a champion ballroom dancer? Or one of my other guests was actually a chippy in his first career. Another one actually had a band when he started off and turned to hospitality because the band really didn't take off.
Not too many people know that young 19-year-old was actually a qualified diesel mechanic. So I had finished my trade and
Yep.
I was pretty much doing the gap holiday. And I rang my boss back in Sydney at Gilbert and Roach, which are still in Sydney, still going. In actual fact, and that's another career story. The apprentice that did his apprenticeship with me today is the CEO of Gilbert and Roach. So he went all the way through, but he's still with the same organisation he started with as a 15-year-old. So I'm a qualified diesel mechanic. So I still work on my own cars and my kids' cars, and yeah, I still enjoy playing around. I don't get too much on the computer side of things because I can't, but I still do the servicing and brakes and bits and pieces.
And does that hold you in good stead when you're talking to, like, when you're in hotels and talking to the engineer and they're talking about plant and equipment, whereas most GMs would go over their head, but you'd have an understanding of that with your background, of course.
Very much so. And I think, again, yeah, it was great life skills to be able to use your hands and also understand when someone says can't be done, you'd say, well, I reckon there is another way that we can, let's have another look at this. And so you can, I suppose, question some of those, responses that you get that might think would go over your head, but they don't. I still recall, I have to tell another funny story, and it was Nigel Harper again. We were in Queenstown. It was in the early 80s, and we were having a number of power strikes. And so when the power would go out, the generator would fire up and, we'd sort of keep going. Well, this day we had the power strike, but the generator didn't start. And so next thing you know, our general manager's looking for his porter, knows diesels.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget, and he came and he used to call me, Mick, the generator hasn't started. I said, yeah, okay, yep, no problem. So go around, anyhow, get it going. Wow, away we go. So, we got it going. Oh, thanks so much. Now, can you just go and clean the foyer and tidy up? I very much went from a very important person until the generator was going in, and I was back to being the porter.
I love it. That's hospitality. I love that. Michael, one of the questions I asked you before the interview was if you could have anything printed on a T-shirt, what would it be? And I actually happen to have the T-shirt here, and it actually says, "Any day above ground is a good day." And that's obviously from a line from James Rain, an Australian crawl song. What's the story behind that saying?
I just think it's a great saying, because when someone's saying, having a whinge, and I just say, hey guys, any day above ground's a good day. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so much or so many worse off, and I think we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate. And look, there's some terrible things going on in the world at the moment, and I really do feel for some of those atrocities that are going on. But I think we have to also remember that we live in a great country. And I have to say, some people would say, aren't you a Kiwi? No, I've worked and lived a lot in New Zealand. I'm originally from Australia, but certainly I love both countries. And I think we are. We're very, very lucky to be here and enjoy what we enjoy every day. And I think our industry is the same. I still say to our youth, get into the industry, go in with a yes attitude as well. It's not all about the employer, it's about you as well. Do you know what I mean? I think it was something that's always held me in good stead for the industry. And that is, someone said, would you do this? I'd say, absolutely. Yes. You know what I mean? I'd have to have a good reason to say no. You know what I mean? So, and I suppose as well, I got moved around a lot because they'd say, will you go here? And maybe others would say no. I'd always say, yes. Yeah. If that's where you want me, that's where I'll go. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think any day above ground's a good day.
And that's an interesting trade. I mean, I was listening to you talk about your obviously early career at the Queenstown Travelodge as it was then, and they'd ask you to work in the bar and you say you'd never done that, but you were happy to do it. And I'm talking to a lot of guests, I think that's what I see is their willingness to literally take on anything that was put their hand up for any challenge. And, that then led to them being so well rounded that they could do anything. And that goes to show with yourself, Michael, definitely so.
And I think interestingly, as a general manager, inevitably you always, doesn't matter how many staff you have working for you and good staff and good team, if you're getting hit at breakfast time, do you know what I mean? If it's 7:30 in the morning and your restaurant's full, someone needs a hand. They must. Do you know what I mean? And so I would always happily probably do the lowest level of role, whether it was clear tables or polish cutlery or whatever it might be, just to give the guys a hand. But also it was a great way to find out what was going on, because people tell you, what's wrong. You get a bit closer to your team. And the same when I was fortunate as well to manage the Park Royal at Melbourne Airport. Now, what a hotel. It comes you never know when it's going to get smashed there. And when it does, it does. And it's all hands on deck. So when you've gone through the industry and you feel very comfortable, get into the restaurant or get into the luggage side of things, you know what I mean? Just get in and enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think really important thing you said, as you muck in, so to speak, with the team, they just see their leader, being, with their sleeves rolled up. And I think it really builds that culture. They know that they can count on you. That makes a big difference. I know GMs I've worked with that are like that. You truly respect them.
Yeah. And respect the roles they do.
Yeah.
And, if the kitchen hand's getting smashed, I don't mind going in and throwing them through the dishwasher with them. And people go, "Are you right there, boss?" I say, "Yeah, I'm having fun. Just leave me alone for a minute."
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's good to be hands-on sometimes.
Yeah.
Michael, we're going to have a chat about the industry, I think, now. And I suppose my first question, are there any emerging trends that sort of make you excited or nervous?
I think excited is there's two sides to it. I've just been to the opening of the W Hotel, and that's a very cool hotel, very cool. So a great iconic hotel for Sydney, another one.
Yep.
And what we're seeing today, and a lot of the hotels, we're seeing a lot more lifestyle hotels come into play, smaller boutique. Now the W is actually a big hotel, so that probably goes a little bit against the grain, but its location warrants that. It's right by the convention centre. But we are seeing a lot more boutique hotels, and I think that will continue. The smaller properties coming into play, and we've seen a lot of those open over the last few years, and I think that will continue. And I think people are looking for that. I'm not saying there's not a place for the big ones, because, like I said, when you got a convention, you need the space, you need the rooms.
Yeah.
But I think that's certainly a trend that we're enjoying. I think on a negative space at the moment, we've probably got some concerns around some of the reforms that are going on in some of the industrial relations. We're keeping a mindful watch on that. There's a bit of work going on in the casualisation, and casuals are so critical to our industry, because how could you run a conference department without casuals? You just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not heard of. So we're certainly keeping a very close watch on that. We're having meetings with the Workplace Relations Minister's office and his chief of staff and advisors. I think that's good that we do get inside those doors, and we are able to work with these people on behalf of industry. And I think that's important. The other one is migration. We've seen our industry blossom and blossom and blossom. It really has. We've got more and more hotels. We have 20,000 hotel rooms open since COVID.
Yep.
So it's quite phenomenal. So whilst our industry decimated over COVID, the actual building industry continued. So from that perspective, we're seeing these openings like the W, like earlier this year, the Ritz-Carlton in Melbourne was seen. There's so many. That's the Adena here in Sydney. I probably know more of the Sydney, the Ace Hotel, the Capella Hotel. When you keep saying them, people go, "Oh, when you start doing it like that, yeah, there has been." So the Crown Towers has only been open. So we've got all these wonderful hotels. Porterhouse Hotel, which is an M Gallery. Anyhow, I can keep going. But I think the interesting thing is, whilst our industry expands and expands and expands, our population doesn't necessarily expand with it. So you're getting more people traveling. Travel has become more of a commodity where people just do it. They just, it's not special anymore. More people dining out than ever before. So all of a sudden, what we've done is we've exploded as an industry over the last decade or more. And yet our populations haven't. So our migration is not so critical now to our industry. And so we're a multicultural country, but we really are heavily reliant on the 600 odd thousand international students that are here studying, that are able to work in the hotels part-time or casually, and also the 140,000 working holiday makers here. And so it's interesting. So I've recently had meetings with Home Affairs and with our immigration minister, Andrew Giles and Claire O'Neill, and we just keep reiterating to them that, we would prefer to be employing Australians all day long, but we just don't have that many. And interestingly, the jobs that the students and that the working holiday makers are happy to do here, guess what? As Australians, we're happy to do those jobs overseas. We just don't like doing them at home so much.
It is true, isn't it?
So the reality is we need to ensure that our government continues to give us this workforce. And we saw it when COVID hit and all these people were sent home. When we reopened, we couldn't staff our operations. We could not find the people. We had to hold back on occupancy. We had to keep restaurants closed. Don't take conferences. Like, unbelievable. Must have been the hardest thing for our GMs to knock back revenue. I mean, it's not in your heart to do it. But you couldn't do it because you couldn't service it. And so I'm pretty proud to say that everything's up and operational now, but it's critical that we keep that workforce. So there's some trends that are, fairly important. And by a flick of a pen, the government can change things and really put us in stride.
Yep.
So we're very mindful of that.
And that's the benefit, I think, of, as you said, the amalgamated organisation having Accommodation Australia representing our industry as the one voice to the government now. Just is a great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they are respectful. The new government is respectful. They're appreciative that we are one voice now. They invite us to their consultation as well, which is fantastic. So, yeah, I'm really happy with how it's progressing. We're only July 1, so we're only 3 months, just over 3 months in, but there's been a lot going on. And of course, major concern that was recently was the Victorian government looking to implement the tourism levy or bed tax.
Yep.
And it was to be across the whole gambit of commercial accommodation in Victoria. And we were able to work closely with government on that. And through support of both our AHA Vic office, our Accommodation Australia team in Victoria, and my national board, and the support. So all this wonderful support using different avenues, and our national policy and research advisor putting together a wonderful paper that we're able to get out to the respective ministers and what have you. And it was really straightforward. We were just saying, it's not fair. That tax should be put on commercial accommodation. We haven't taken the inventory of housing out of the marketplace. That's the short-term rental accommodation. And common sense prevailed. They listened, and pleased to say that the levy has been put on short-term rental accommodation and not on commercial accommodation. Now, it's a watching brief now because it doesn't come into play till January 1, 25. So for the next 15 months, we'll have to keep batting them back as the short-term rental accommodation try and pull us into it.
Understand. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch. Michael, what is one of the best pieces of advice you were ever given, and why was that so important?
Look, I probably touched on it before, and that was to have the right attitude, but have a yes attitude. And certainly I've found that that's always held me in good stead for the future. And I think the other one was as well, be careful not to move for money. Careful not to change a role for money. Because if you're enjoying a role you're doing, and someone offers you more money, you have to remember it's not more money if you don't enjoy where you go and you leave. You're back to square one. So you really need to keep that in focus as well. Money's not everything. And I mean, I've often said to people throughout my career, our career is a really good career. It's great skills. It's great people. It's a really good industry. It's not the highest paid industry, but you'll get a lot of satisfaction. But you can, if you're looking for a career, you will get there. And when you do get there, then the wages are good.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love that.
Mm.
As we get sort of ready to wrap up, I think the final question is if we look ahead maybe 3 years and 10 years from now, what do you think the industry will look like? And do you have any advice for hoteliers on how to prepare? And that could be looping back in, the skills gap that we mentioned. It could be, me, I'm a geek at the end of the day. It could be in relation to technology. Yeah. So as we look sort of potentially 3 years and 10 years ahead, what do you think the industry is going to look like and what should we do to prepare for that?
Well, I think we are going to see continued growth as an industry.
Yeah.
And I think the concern, and I have mentioned this on a number of occasions, is when you have been in the industry as long as I have, someone once said, don't be prepared if it happens, be prepared for when it happens. And I think if you take that approach, it makes a big difference. So I would suggest that there's a lot of people today in a lot of roles that have gone through and we've got through COVID, we've come out the other side. Do they have contingency plans for when it happens again? Do they have contingency plans for what is the next disruptor to our industry? And we've just seen what's going on in Israel and Hamas at the moment, and I think we don't know where that's going to escalate to, but there's concerns, and this is the thing. And we then, then you go to the September 11s, SARS, it just keeps going. So I think it seems to be somewhere between every 3 to 7 years, there's something that gives us a world changing factor. And I think we just have to have contingencies to make sure we're ready, because we will continue to flourish, we will continue to expand, but we need to be prepared for when we have those situations come upon us.
Yeah. And I think we need to learn from those situations because as much as COVID was a devastating time, I've heard Scott Boys and Grant talk about the fiscal aspects of, a lot of general managers prior to that, not all of them, but some of them, because times are so good, you didn't have to be as cost conscious. But as you come out of COVID, you've learned a new skill now that you can actually take with you moving on. I think we also saw.
We did that through GFC as well. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. But I don't disagree. One thing that I think did come out of COVID, which was a positive, was there was so much more collaboration. Collaboration through the associations, collaboration through chains, like everyone just said, we're all in this. And so everyone got in and worked together. And I think, to be fair, we're probably going to, we'll look back and say, that was the worst time, but we're probably the strongest we've ever been today. We're not there yet because we're still, I think Sydney, we're sitting, back up in the sort of high. I think we're sitting around 70, sort of around those mid to high 70s now for the past 12 months. So we've still got a ways to go. Same with Victoria. Victoria's about 65, 66. Now, Victoria's had huge, and particularly Melbourne, I talk about Melbourne. Melbourne has had a huge amount of hotels open in a short period of time. But the reality is that we've now got the China market about to start coming back, and that will certainly bring these cities back to life when they come in abundance. So that's a good thing. It's interesting that you can take one market out of you want one country out of the market like China. It has to have that effect. There's no other country that can fulfill it.
Very true, very true. And we saw it in the late 80s with Japan, obviously in Queensland. And that's just another example where you need to be prepared and have multiple source markets, I suppose. You can't put all your eggs in that one basket.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And I think we have got other markets, and Southeast Asia certainly is performing well, but we will certainly benefit from the approved destination status coming back for China, and that's now in place. So we're starting to see those bookings, coming thick and fast, which is great.
Great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
No, I've really enjoyed talking to you, Brendan. It's always good talking to you. And I've appreciated your professionalism over the years with your technical assistance, and long may it continue.
Thank you, Michael. It's just my aim to help the industry, I think, realize that technology can be used for good. I think we've got a little way to go. I think we're still lag a little bit behind sometimes in our adoption, but we are getting there. And I think COVID was a bit of a shot in the arm as well. It sort of forced us to look at, how we can use technology to help support our team, basically.
And it's interesting just on that. We've had some fairly nasty cyber attacks happen, and if I think of Optus and Medibank, and it's interesting. A lot of that was, came as well out of the Russia come Ukraine scenario. So are we prepared now for what might come out of Israel and the situation over there? Are we likely to see more cyber incidents occur? So it's interesting that sits there as a negative to technology, that we have got, we've got these people out there that are looking to do damage. So I think we as an industry need to get better prepared for that as well.
Yes, no, I think you're right. I think, unfortunately, though, technology plays such a vital role. When you look at how guests have changed now, and I know because I started in 2000 working for a company, providing guest internet when a lot of hotels thought we don't need it. And
Yeah,
within 2 years, corporate tenders were saying you must have high-speed internet access. And it went from obviously web browsing today, people consuming content. So the bandwidth requirements that hotels have gone through have changed dramatically. It's not only from the guest point of view, from back of house now, we've got our teams running around with devices which are connected to the network, giving them updates on, rooms that have checked out that they can clean, or requests for towels and amenities. All of it's streamlining the guest experience, but it's also putting demands on the network. So yeah, that whole interest, that area of security is something that's just, and I think it really comes down to, and I have done some podcasts on this with my other series, working with providers in the industry that can literally manage that security for you.
yeah,
Really down to, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so very much important for our future. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Thank you again, Michael. You have a wonderful afternoon.
thanks very much, Brendan. Good to
Thank you.
see you. Bye bye now.